All right, so as mentioned, fossil fuels are still the primary energy resource that is utilized around the world in volume. Probably not the most widespread because they don't have that much usage in developing nations, and most of the world is still developing. But the fear is, one of the concerns is the fact that developing nations are becoming industrialized, and because of that, they're going to increase their consumption of fossil fuels. We have particularly seen this with China and India as they're going through their industrialization process, and of course they have huge populations as well to deal with. One of the big things that is still driving the primary use of fossil fuels is the use for transportation. We still haven't gotten a really good way to transport things, particularly in cars and trucks and things like that, an alternative for doing that, although that's being worked upon, of course. As a comparison, we look at net energy. Now, net energy is not just chemical energy. It's actually pretty similar amongst these three forms, these three types of fossil fuels. But when we talk about net energy environmental science, that means you take the energy you get from that resource and then subtract the amount of energy that was used to obtain it, process it, transport it, and do everything necessary to get to the point where it's going to be able to be burned and used as an energy resource. So when we look at it that way, coal has definitely got the lowest amount of net energy from that, followed by oil, which is petroleum, same thing, medium, and natural gas requires very little to get it ready to go and everything, and therefore it has the highest net energy of these three substances. Supply, of course, is a big issue from a practical standpoint. Also, remember that these are mineral resources, therefore they are non-renewable. So when you run out of the supply of these materials in one place, you have to go somewhere else and find it, and therefore that's spreading impact all over the place, and that becomes an issue both environmentally speaking, and of course it's also a big economic and in many cases as well a political issue because of those things. So what we see here is that coal actually is doing pretty good there with a roughly 1,000-year supply of reserves, known reserves at the rate of consumption, and even accounting for our future increases in consumption around the world. There's a lot of coal in the ground still, okay, within a time frame that people are not too concerned with it. Coal primarily is used for generation of electricity. Most electrical power plants that exist today are coal plants, and most of the ones that are being built are coal plants. Percentage-wise, it may not have the highest sector of growth. I think wind does, but by far, overall, around the world, coal-fired plants are the ones that are being built. And the reason being is that it's cheap, and the plants themselves are cheap to build. So they don't have a lot of safety concerns and stuff like you have with other types of energy supplies. Next from that, you got petroleum. That's a low number. That's 60 years. That's your lifetime, of course. Hopefully. That means that some serious changes are going to have to take place when it comes to the utilization of petroleum. And as I mentioned, it's still the big place in which we find that usage is in transportation. And we still haven't really come up with a good alternative for that, particularly for individual transport and everything. Gasoline and diesel fuel make very good compact fuel sources for the internal combustion engine, and therefore that's a technological problem that has to be solved. The good news is there's a great amount of research and energy that's being put into it, and for you guys that means opportunity. So there's a lot of opportunity in that area of developing different ways, in particular transporting things, so we don't have to rely on petroleum anymore. It does, of course, have its environmental drawbacks, which we'll talk about there for a minute, but from a strictly practical point of view, that's a scary number right there. And it's not like you're going to be, one day, 60 years from now, you're going to wake up and the headlines will say, no, there's no petroleum left, or, and you won't be able to drive your car to work or whatever else like that. It will, of course, dwindle as time goes by and become more and more expensive and therefore less used as that happens. Natural gas, a little bit better shape with that one. A lot of natural gas reserves are in your petroleum reserves. They're together, they form at the same time. So there's a little bit more of that out there, but still one that you can't just say, oh, let's just use it all the time and don't worry about the supply of it. The extraction method is how do we get to it? How do we obtain the resource? Where do we get it from? These are all mineral resources, of course, so they all come from the ground. Coal is a solid, so good old-fashioned strip mining. We've talked about many of the environmental impacts that come from doing that. And coal is the #1 mined mineral resource in the world, and the main thing that we dig out of the ground and utilize. Okay. Oil and natural gas, of course, one of their advantages is that they are fluids. They're liquid and gas, respectively. So that means you don't have to dig it out of the ground. You can just put a pipe down to it, put a well down to it, and a lot of times they're under pressure, or you'll pump it out if it's not under pressure, and you can obtain it easily that way. That also means they can be transported relatively easily as well. This has been one of the biggest advantages, and the reasons why they've been very popular in the past. Is they're easily used because of their fact that they're either liquid or a gas. In particular, liquids are easy to transport. So you obtain them from your on and offshore drilling. Same thing with natural gas, on and offshore drilling. Okay, the main environmental impact from the use of fossil fuels is the fact that you burn them and the air pollution that's produced from there. We've talked about that considerably in the past. When we did the air pollution unit, we said that that was the main burning of fossil fuels and biomass, which we'll talk about later, are the main sources of these air pollution. Nitrogen oxides, it's up there. That's not what I was asking for here, but I'll go ahead and give you the point for remembering that. Is it a 1 there, everyone? Yeah? Okay, so I'll give you the point for remembering that. What we're looking for, whether it was high, medium, or low, as far as the amount of pollution it produces, this is correct. Coal is the least pure. It's the hardest to purify, of course, because it's a solid. You're going to have anything that's in the ground with it that's going to burn with it and end up in the atmosphere. One of the big ones, of course, is your sulfur oxide. Sulfur is very common in many types of coal. And therefore, that's the biggest source of what environmental phenomenon that we've talked about some. And what acid rain or acid precipitation, this is your main source of acid precipitation, is burning coal. Okay. Another thing, let's go ahead and put this in here, is heavy metals. This is also a major source of heavy metal contamination. For example, the mercury that's found in tuna, this is believed to be the main source of that because there's really nowhere else. Most industrial processes that use mercury have been either eliminated or they're highly regulated or released to keep that mercury from getting out. But it's still a big source of it. That and lead and any other kind of heavy metals that are in with the coal, mixed in with the coal. When you burn it, of course, it's going to go in the atmosphere and get out into the environment. Okay, so coal is definitely your dirtiest fuel. It has the most pollution associated with it. Petroleum, not as much. Petroleum does, the heavier ones still have sulfur in them a lot of times, so SOx is another thing that you'll get from there. And you may even notice that they've taken steps to reduce that. If you look at, anybody have a diesel vehicle? Anybody in your family that nobody, no diesel owners at all? Yeah, have you ever filled it up? No. Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a little sticker on there when you fill it. You can see it when you're using the gas pump too. They're usually right beside each other. But the little sticker on there says that this diesel fuel is certified to be less than 15 parts per million of sulfur. That's something within the past 5 or 6 years they enacted to reduce the amount of sulfur and therefore sulfur oxides that you get from burning diesel fuel. Practically, sulfur is pretty much non-existent in gasoline. Gasoline is a little cleaner than diesel. When you get into heavier things, fuel oil, like that they use a lot in the north, has some sulfur in it and stuff like that. So those are all petroleum products, and so there's still some sulfur in there. Therefore, sulfur oxides is still an issue with using petroleum as a fuel. Natural gas, clean burning, propane, methane, butane, they're all in there. And very clean fuel. It's also easy to purify. It's a gas, so you have very low pollution produced from that. Think about this. Natural gas is what they use in stoves and heaters inside houses all the time. It's a common process to have a constantly burning natural gas flame going on in your house, that indicates that there's not going to be, first of all, there's not going to be carbon monoxide produced because it burns completely. You can tell that by the blueness of the flame. And second of all, you're not going to get all the sulfur oxides and all the other kind of things that you would get from these other types of fossil fuels. So very clean fuel, low impact when it comes to obtaining and everything else. So that's definitely your natural gas, your best choice, environmentally speaking. Notice that all of these do produce CO2. And CO2, of course, is a, what kind of gas? Greenhouse gas. Thank you. Hopefully you remember that. Natural gas is a mixture, but it is mostly methane, and we also know that methane is a greenhouse gas, a powerful one, more powerful than CO2. But all of these are going to produce CO2 when you burn them because they all have carbon in them. And so, consequently, carbon reacts with the oxygen in the air, produces carbon dioxide. So that's always going to be something that happens from burning greenhouse gases. Okay. Other environmental impacts outside of the air pollution that's produced, of course, mining. We've talked about that. Coal being, that's what you have to do with that. Strip mining. Therefore, all the different things, the air and the water pollution and the habitat destruction we talked about with mining is going to be happen when you use coal. Transportation. That is, coal being a solid is you're going to have to put in rail cars and other means of conveyance like that. And anytime you transport something, you're going to have to burn fuel to do that. You're going to have roadways or railways and other kinds of things built. So there's always impact there. Petroleum, as you know, oil spills, water contamination in general. I'm going to say more specifically groundwater contamination. I'll go ahead and give you the point though, Group 6, don't worry. But groundwater contamination there's been many instances of leaking containers, storage of gasoline and diesel fuel getting into groundwater supplies. Now, that's been a problem in the past, still is in some areas. Now there's an issue of groundwater contamination from the process of fracking. We're going to talk more about what that is, but basically it's used to push petroleum out of what they call oil shale, a type of rock that has petroleum in it, but it's not like the oil reserves that we've been getting petroleum out of. It has to be forced out of it to use it, and so they push water into there, and a lot of times they end up pushing that into the aquifer and areas around there and contaminating that. So that's an issue we'll talk about more later. And then once again, your natural gas, very low impact. Even the drilling, you can put a natural gas well up, and a high volume one would take up not much more space in this room. So it's also low impact on that end of it, but you do have the fact that, like I said, natural gas is mostly methane, and methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, so of course if you're going to drill it, use it, you're going to have more of a chance of it getting up into the atmosphere and therefore possibly affecting our climate. Questions? Anybody about fossil fuels? Yep.